Hello and welcome to Pain Unfiltered, where we go in-depth into the interventional pain and spine world with some of the top key opinion leaders and executives in the space. We are your hosts, Dr. Patrick Buchanan and Dr. Timothy Deere for this ASPN podcast. Let's get started. We're just coming back from the ASPN conference, and man, what an amazing conference. It was so good that it looks like you lost your voice. How you doing?
Patrick, that was the best of all time. 3,000, more than 3,000 people there registered, and even another 1,000 or so there for other meetings, and the camaraderie, the mentoring. It really is just sharing great science, but also sharing great advice to each other. It was tremendous. What a great success, and congratulations to all my colleagues who did so much work and so much planning.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a shout out. I know I'm going to be missing people, but obviously Eric Peterson, the president, all the way down, Dawood Syed, the co-founder, Jason, Kaz Emmer-Delfan, David Lee, the ones that kind of put the agenda together. Everyone's done a fantastic job. Three quick takeaways that I got from this. Number one, like you said, this thing just keeps getting bigger and bigger. Over 3,000 attendees. Not only just physicians in the industry, but the VCs were there. You mentioned you had meetings with Wells Fargo and the like. So this has become kind of the epicenter of the pain world right here. Number two, the youth movement. I was really surprised to see not only fellows there, but residents and even medical students express their interest in pain. So I think the future is really bright for this society. And the last was the content. I kept getting feedback, not only from doctors personally, but also social media afterwards, of how phenomenal the content was, from the lab to the business courses to the speakers and discussion panels. So that was great. One quote I had from one of the doctors, I thought this was great, was his first time here. It says, "This event has ruined all other conferences for me." So I think that's a huge stamp of approval for the ASPN. For any of those who couldn't make it this year, definitely try to check it out next year, because this just keeps getting better and better. Want to also thank all the sponsors for your support this year at the conference, specifically to the sponsors that are supporting this ASPN podcast, specifically Mainstay Medical, Saluda Medical, Nalu Medical, Medtronic, and Simplicity. Thank you again for all your support for this. So Tim, I want to switch gears now and take a deeper dive into one of our newer sections in our society, the health and wellness section. So Tim, can you say just a couple words about this new area of interest that ASPN's forming?
Well, Patrick, we have a lot of members who have an interest in longevity, health and wellness. And really, I think there's two important reasons why we should do this. And one is our members. It doesn't do you much good if you're so unhealthy, you have a early life, that you actually have heart disease when you're 40, that you have all these other issues. You won't be able to take care of your patients or your family. So for our members, we want you to be healthier. And I think that we'll talk about that today. And then for our patients, we know that every pound of weight you gain puts 4 pounds of pressure on your spine and on your knees, for example. So we want our patients to be healthier. We want to teach them really best health methods. And again, as you said, I met so many residents and fellows at our meeting. We want to have them start that now when they're in their 20s and 30s, and not wait till they're 50 or 60 to start that movement. So those are some of the reasons we did this. We have some great members who have an interest. We're going to be doing some publications on this topic now. And I think it's going to be one of the future things that are really impactful. The panel session at the meeting was totally packed with people with an interest in this. I think we'll be expanding this section on longevity and wellness. So this is a really timely time for me, you, and our special guest to talk today.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I think this further distinguishes this pain society from other pain societies too. So we're not worried about our patients, obviously, but us as a physician group as well with our health and wellness. So want to bring on our guest today who knows a little bit more about that. He was a former Olympic swimmer, finalist at the Olympic trials, a professional triathlete, but most importantly, he's been Tim's triathlon running coach. So Matt Dixon, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you having me on here.
Thanks, Matt. So why don't you start off and talk a little bit about your background? I just gave you a brief intro, but more about your background, how you got started in this, and what you can bring to the table.
Yeah, my educational background is clinical physiology, actually, but I really came at the coaching from my own experiences as an athlete. I'm a great example of how to do a professional triathlon career very poorly. I I had high work ethic, a certain amount of talent, and just threw hard work at it, and ended up with chronic fatigue, and it ended my career before it would begin, but that was a catalyst for me, really, at the time. This is now going back 20 years, looking at the landscape of endurance sports and seeing many people underperforming, and it really became my mission to hopefully help the folks that I was going to coach not make the same mistakes that I did. And my coaching career started very much in a narrow focus, which was helping professional athletes. So I had a squad and team of professional triathletes all doing the Ironman or the half Ironman distance, trying to win world titles. And ended up that we had a lot of success with this methodology that was really polarizing at the time. It was against the grain because we were introducing these novel concepts such as focusing on recovery, proper nutrition, rather than just hard work, integrating strength training, etc. And long story short, I sort of went through several years just being more of an elite coach around world-class athletes, started to extend that methodology to really what has become my passion, which is to help time-starved people integrate these habits and methods into their life to help them perform in broader life. And one of the examples is my work with Tim here, which we've been working with for many years, off and on, I would say.
Yeah, I would like to hear a little bit more about that. How did you first come to meet Tim, and what has been your experience with Tim as a runner on that side of things?
So we met each other. I have to go back into my my Rolodex of history here, and Tim making reach out. But we met originally through triathlon at some events in which Tim was as a member of an organization under the Ironman umbrella called the Executive Challenge. And I was coaching a lot of the executives, so C-level executives, doctors, lawyers, etc., that have incredibly time-starved lives. So I was sort of partnered to try and help as an educational and coaching resource. And Tim reached out for help. And as soon as I met Tim, I knew that I had an outlier. If I'm not sure how much the listeners will know, but someone that's incredibly driven, incredibly lovely person, and I always think in anything in life, like anything that we bring to life that is our strength can also be our undoing. And Tim, and I hope this comes across the right way, is maybe a great example of that, because I don't think I've ever met anyone more committed, tougher, and able to sort of run off the edge and through buildings and doors, etc. But when I came in and started to work with Tim, what I saw was very similar to my journey as an athlete. Pretty tough. He's much tougher than I am, wholly committed, but not necessarily yielding all of the performance gains that he could from that hard work. Was the return on investment really great? And so we went through a journey which, and this I should say here, takes incredible coachability and bravery to adjust your approach and listen to someone that's maybe got a different perspective, maybe a different set of wisdom and skill set, and actually adapt and evolve your whole approach to ultimately get both of us what we wanted, which was a faster Tim. And so it's probably been 6 or 7 years, Tim, by memory. Is that about right? That we've been
maybe a little bit longer, man. It's been a while now, so we've had a pretty good journey here. So I'd say somewhere in that range, maybe even 8 or 9 years.
Maybe longer. I always miss out the pandemic years a little bit. So yeah.
That's right. So I think Patrick, I had to buy onto the concept of rest and recovery and nutrition, and I think all those things were things I had neglected. So as we talk about wellness for our members, I think, Matt, we have another extreme. We have a lot of physicians that come to visit me, and they're trying to do a 5K, or they're trying to do a hike up a mountain. And so it's a different perception than someone trying to do Badwater or Ironman Hawaii. Mm-hmm. So that's something I think maybe Patrick and you can explore more in detail as well.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, Matt. What you described with Tim is right on point with my experience and many others with the society. Is ultra hard worker, super passionate, get things done, and always there for you as well. So that's great. Now, you mentioned, Matt, about some of these guidelines and principles on how to combat some of this stuff, because, you know, a lot of us only have one speed, right? And
Yeah.
that's full throttle. So can you talk about some of these other measures you've kind of taught and put in place to help maximize that?
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful. Let's take a step back. What are we after here? Like, whether we're thinking about a world-class athlete, whether we're thinking about a CEO or an executive, whether we're talking about a pain doctor, we really have an elite challenge in many ways. And I think that's a helpful mindset. It's not an elite athlete, an elite challenge. And that's that we have to show up every single day ready to perform at our very best. And we have to do that under a set of massive competing demands, very high restrictions, probably some other demands outside of our role, family, travel, etc. And we need to effectively bring our best. And that's what a world-class athlete has to do. And for us to do that, it doesn't mean that we all have to become athletes, but we should apply an elite mindset to that. And there are two main components that I consistently see to help people not try and find harmony and balance, which I think is a complete myth, and not to try and reduce stresses, but instead equip ourselves to show up and meet those demands and to create, and here's the magic phrase, sustained high performance. The first side of it is physical. When we have a platform of health, in other words, putting intention behind many of the things that we have to do anyway, putting intention around our movement, so our exercise, making sure that we're doing consistent exercise, which we all know is healthy for us, but many of us don't think about it through a performance lens, helping us show up in our lives better. Making sure that we're getting really good quality sleep to enable us to process stress, grow and repair, bring better energy to our life, and putting intention behind some really simple habits, eating, hydration, etc. It helps us, here's the magic word, feel better. And if you feel better and you have more stable energy and better energy, you can physically bring better resilience, better stamina, better staying power to anything that you care about. So that's the first side of it. The other part of it is think about your very best employee, or think about yourself and you think, what would you want as an employee? You'd want someone that was focused on the right things, that was wholly committed, that was really resilient and adaptable, that can compete with various demands, that can spin many different plates at the time, was probably really good at coaching and collaboration. So these things, that's more the mindset. And those traits of a mindset are really interesting because a lot of people look at those. And if you think about an elite athlete, they always exude those things. But those traits, they're not genetic. They're not innate. They're actually learnable and coachable. And so when you actually go on a journey to say, I'm going to prioritize my platform of health, I'm going to prioritize and put intention behind some really simple habits, you not only show up better on a day-to-day basis, but over time, you actually develop these traits of a high performance mindset. And when you lock in, that's when you have a high performer. So if we bring it back to Tim a little bit, and just using it as an example, there's real value, I think, on any of us taking on a challenge outside of the workplace. And if we think about like bad water, which is an extreme event, I never would want to do that. Okay, Tim wants to do that. But what does it provide Tim? Well, it provides obviously pride and satisfaction, probably boosts the ego when he does really well. But that's not really the value for him as a human being, him as a pain doctor, him as a father and partner. Because by him going on that journey, it creates structure and order for him to put intention behind his habits. I must recover better. I must sleep well. I must eat well. I must exercise. And also, It's experiential, where by definition, he's going to be met with obstacles, roadblocks, adversity. He's going to need to think out of the box. He's need to collaborate with someone like me. And so through that journey, his brain receives the training to actually develop these mindsets that are apps, or these traits that are absolutely applicable to life. And so that's an extreme example. But for any of us, coming back to it, as you said, Tim, it's not about doing bad water on an Ironman. It might be about, I'm going to go on a hiking trip. I'm going to go and do a 5K. It doesn't matter what your start line is. The key is the commitment to prioritize this stuff. And I'm sorry if I'm going on a monologue here and hogging it too much, but the biggest reason, I think there are 2 or 3 reasons that people don't take this on. The first is they think they don't have time. And that's actually just a shift of prioritization. And actually saying, when you take on a journey like this, it tends to be the thing that unlocks your effectiveness. If you want something done, give it to a busy person, yeah? So it actually creates rigor around your structure. It forces you to prioritize. It forces you to be effective. The second reason that people take it on is they're a little bit scared of failure often, or they don't think they can do it. But the key part of it is all you need to do is make a commitment and then just take the very first step. Because what we're really talking about is transformation. Transformation for yourself is not about athletic conversion therapy. It's about starting where you're at right now and building mini victories over time that you can accumulate, that suddenly in a year's time, you can say, I feel different, I show up better, I'm a higher performer. And so I think I answered about 10 questions in that answer, so I'm sorry, but that's the broad perspective.
No, that's fantastic, Matt. I mean, yeah, to unpack all that information, I think I can relate to my own journey as well. So just to give you a little background, I was fortunate enough to be a Division I tennis player at the University of Notre Dame. So we played on pretty much the highest levels of collegiate sports. We made it to the Sweet 16 my senior year and got to top 12 in the country. So a lot of that stuff is bringing back memories of my training and not only that, just the intention to train. And like you said, both mentally and physically getting your body ready for competition. So not only was I practicing tennis, right? I was conditioning, right? I was running for an hour before that. I was going in the weight room for an hour before that. And then to balance all that with studying for pre-med, going on airplanes and studying, taking tests at hotels. So time management also was a huge thing to learn about. So all these things kind of prepared me for what I'm doing now as a physician with all these high demands and with patients, with my personal life. And I joke, I'm trying to go professionally in pickleball now. So I'm kind of training all that again for that part of my life too. But it brings back all those things that you just touched about. So I think those are great points.
So yes. Matt, let me ask you a question. So what are you're there in San Francisco, Purple Patch, great organization you developed. You've had a lot of physicians, I'm sure, reach out to you. Mm-hmm. So you'll have maybe several thousand physicians watching this or listening to this podcast. What are some you mentioned obstacles. What are some things you've seen physicians do that are harmful to them? And then how do you see that? How do you even start if you haven't been doing things that are not healthy, not contributing to your wellness or your longevity? What have you seen to be the major hurdles, and how do you recommend just getting started?
Well, there's firstly, you guys know better than me. There's lots of different types of physicians with lots of different schedules and different demands. You know, you got an ER person that's got all the challenges of shift change and working overnight and all of these things. So I'll try and keep it pretty broad. Here's the biggest mistake that I think a lot of physicians and broader population make when they decide that they're going to look to prioritize and integrate some of these very basic habits and principles into their life. The first thing is that they miss the word integration. And what they tend to do is they have all of their competing demands. So everything around their family, everything with their roles and responsibility. And they take a program, and let's just make it up. I'm going to go and sign up and train for a 5K, or I've decided to do a marathon, or I'm just going to start to really prioritize X, Y, and Z. And they just dump it on top of life. And all they're doing there is just adding another thing to an already busy life that's got too many competing demands. And so I think the first challenge of that is that they tend to view all of these pillars, if you want to call it that, as independent entities. But we are one human being. And so instead of treating it like that, you have to think about things more holistically and in a broader perspective. The question is, the second big mistake that I see people make is trying to make too much of a leap straight away. So the inspiration of, I'm going to do this. I've just listened to this English geezer rabbit on about the importance of it. I believe in it. I'm going to go and do it. And they go zero to hero straight away, like a light switch. And I can't overstate how patience and embracing a journey of transformation, and I'm going to unpack what that is the absolute unlock. So if you think about, and maybe a good analogy, and I'm obviously not a physician, is you think about maybe treatment care, or you think about everything that a patient could do to improve. But the worst thing that you can do 9 times out of 10, unless it's something acute, is try and change everything at once. I'm going to sleep well. I'm going to exercise more. I'm going to focus on my nutrition. I'm going to start to hydrate. I'm going to embrace recovery. So instead of that, you pick something that's really accessible that you can actually do straight away. So if someone is sedentary, it might just start to say every single day, I'm going to go from whatever number of steps I tend to take. The average American takes about 3,000 steps. That's not very many. I'm going to move that to 6,000 steps. Maybe if they're 6,000 steps, moving to 10,000 steps. That might just be every single night after my dinner, whatever time I get to eat that, I'm going to get to go for a 20-minute walk. And I'm going to build that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And what will happen there is they'll feel a little better. And when they feel a little better and they get a little bit of validation, then maybe you can add something else. Great. I'm going to actually think about what I'm eating now. Or maybe I'm going to get to bed at a reasonable time if schedules allow it, etc. And so it's a process of slowly, incrementally building positive little tiny victories on top of each other. That's what transformation is. You can't change too much at time, and you have to think about it in a long arc. And so I think those are the two things that you want to get. And that way you get to actually manage effectiveness. I will say one more thing very quickly as well. This is the same for all the very, very busy people that I work with, of which physicians are absolutely at the top of the pile for this. There is a cornerstone habit that is the gateway of success. And that is at the start of every week, before you go into Monday, if you use that as your start of your week, into chaos and a massive competing demands. If you spend 30 minutes and you look through your week and what it looks like from your role at work, what your responsibilities and non-negotiables are in life, maybe you're coaching Jenny's soccer, maybe you've got to drop the kids at camp, whatever it is, then you integrate when you're going to prioritize some habits around, this is where I'm going to sleep, this is where I might get a little micro nap in, this is where I'm going to think about hydration. Then you can integrate your exercise and movement, whatever level that is. Tim, walking 10,000 steps a day, it's a broad range. That we call that the Sunday special. That helps unlock organizational effectiveness, and it's a prioritization exercise. And that is the number one thing that anyone could do to ensure success. And of course, that integration side of it.
Well, Matt, you're giving me flashbacks again of my college days. In terms of integration and getting better every day, I just remember something my college tennis coach said at Notre Dame, Bobby Bayless. He says, just try to get 1% better every day. Yeah, and that has stuck with me on whatever I do, on whatever task I'm trying to do. Slowly but surely, you're going to get there and get better. So 1% every day. That's kind of stuck with me and helped me to get to where I want to be. Mm-hmm. So thank you for bringing that back again. So as you mentioned, whether or not, we as physicians are leaders, whether we're leaders of our practice, for our patients, We command a team, whether that's of nurses, of APPs, of medical assistants, whatever we have, right? So how do we translate or create that performance in culture as a leader and transition that to our team?
Well, we do a lot of work actually with executive teams and leadership teams. So this is something that's central to a lot of our education, and a lot of leaders fall into the mistake of saying, "This is what I want my team to do," but they don't look into the mirror and realize that it actually starts with them. And so whether we like it or not as leaders, we are role models. We are setting the tone, and that comes in different forms. So the first thing is sort of like you've got to put your own oxygen mask on first. So a lot of what we talk about today, you have to lead it and you have to live it. And then it begins with change management, simple change management. In other words, I think you start with your leadership team or whoever your sort of top influencers are in any organization, whether it's medical, whether it's private equity, it doesn't matter what it is. And you say, let's do this. And if you can develop a common consensus of, yes, we're going to prioritize this, and yes, we're going to do this, it then begins with behavior. And what I mean by that is it's not an afterthought. It's not a bolt-on. For me, this is a key prioritization of these habits to unlock sustained high performance. And so in order to do that, we need to be very transparent. This is what I'm doing. And it might be I'm getting ready for band water like Tim Deere. It might be I'm going to try and walk 5K. I'm going to do these, whatever it is, but being really transparent and sharing them so that you can develop mechanisms of support and accountability. And then be really transparent so far as this is when I'm doing it. I'm going to calendar it. I'm going to share my experiences. Not to be a hero, not to drive ego, but to help mechanisms of support. And when people see that behavior, and then you need to, as a leader, put into place to say, hey, we do care about you as human beings. You should exercise. We're going to reward that. It's okay if you want to go, and if you're absolutely exhausted, taking a 7-minute lie down, that whether you fall asleep or not is going to make you more productive for the next 4 or 5 hours. And if you can do that, that's okay. It's not you being lazy. So there are mechanisms that you support that before you know it, you have something cultural. And so it's all about, the conditions of great team. At the bottom, it's trust and understanding, support and accountability, shared mission, and going on a journey with each other.
So Matt, let me ask you one more question from me. And so I started writing a book recently. I've written a lot of textbooks, but this new book's called Suffer, A New Tool for Success. And I've written the first 2 chapters. I think I'm going to need you to help write the foreword to that book. But, I've put myself in the ICU. I've laid in the ditch cramping. And every time I've done those things, I think I've learned from those things. So my question for you is, you've coached a lot of elite athletes. What can we learn when we put ourselves in an uncomfortable situation? What have you seen athletes learn, and how can we take that situation that may have been seen as a real negative and take that and build that into this integration process?
It's great. Like, the best place of growth, mental and physical, is when we're very uncomfortable. And it's interesting, if you read the media, we are bombarded with high pressure and high stress is harmful. In fact, there's loads of performance experts or health and wellness experts. How do you reduce stress? But if you think about someone with an elite mindset, it's not that high stress environments and challenge is comfortable. It's not very pleasurable, but elite athletes, build positive relationships with stress. They don't view it as something that's actually going to harm them. They view it as something that is necessary for growth. And it starts with mindset. And there's a great researcher out of Stanford, Dr. Elia Crump, has done a lot of research on mindset as it relates to stress, and actually seen seismic increases in performance when people actually view it as that. And so we already kind of knew that through our journey with world-class athletes. And that is a really common trait. And so there is no growth without discomfort. And that's why actually when we started the conversation, I said, this isn't about trying to reduce stress. This is setting up our body and our mind so that we can meet the demands and excel in stress. And so that's really it. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to end up in the ICU, that we have to extract all of the joy out of life. But being uncomfortable, it's even, I'll give you another example. There's something really special, I think, about multidisciplinary sport. So my sport was triathlon, but there's something pretty cool around that because there are 3 disciplines in that sport. And how often in life do we as human beings say, we're going to expose ourselves and we're going to take on something that we're not very good at? So naturally, a lot of people say, I'm going to do a marathon because I know I can run, and I can't swim, so I'm not going to do that. But the great thing about triathlon, let's use an example, is you might come from a biking background, you might be able to run, but if you can't swim, that is a venue where, yeah, you've got to go and do this sport, but you are getting uncomfortable, maybe overcoming fear that's creating growth. That's how it happens. That's the power. And so when we develop a positive relationship with that discomfort, that's growth. And the one final thing I'd say as well is a different relationship with failure. So I always like to talk about things that you've done well that you can build on, and growth opportunities. What could you have done better? And the only time that you really think about failure is when you fail to do the things that are under your control. But quite often, you might have setbacks, you might have, quote, failures, but all they are is growth opportunity. And as soon as you shift your relationship with failure, your relationship with stress, that's when you start to actually be able to release some really special personal performances. Whatever it is, it's about you growing and improving.
Yeah, those are great points, Matt. I think a lot of these points are why college athletes transition so well to some of these jobs, and why a lot of these execs and industry leaders are, picking a lot of these athletes, and they know they're going to perform well. Like you said, being able to face adversity, being able to handle stress, being able to be motivated, being a team player, all these things, like you said, they don't teach in the classrooms. You kind of have to learn them and experience them yourself. So we're going to leave you with one more question. Let's have you share a story about Tim. I know you've known him for a while now, 7-8 years. Something that maybe we don't know, or because we're so used to kind of the medical side of Tim and the patient care side of Tim. Just want to hear one story that kind of sticks out to you.
Well, I could tell a couple of really funny stories, but I'll and I won't tell you the story when he called me and he said, "Hey, I'm in the ICU," because that's not that inspirational. But I'll tell you a story about plasticity of what it takes to get to a goal. So Tim, if the listeners haven't heard, one of the events that Tim has got ready for and succeeded really well at is a race called Badwater, which is 135 miles. It's through Death Valley. It is complete madness. I mean, if you're signing up for that, there's something that you're running away from typically. And you think 135-mile running race. And Tim said, "How are we going to train for this, coach?" And I said, "We're going to do a lot of swimming, and we're going to do a lot of biking. We're going to do a little bit of running." And leveraging different sports to get ready for this thing, because I really wanted Tim, who is a heavier guy relative to these little whippets that race this thing typically. Tim's over 200 pounds. Tim's over 50 years of age. I said, we're going to do just enough running, but we're going to leverage different disciplines to get ready. And we're going to do a whole bunch of strength work. And most athletes would have run for the hills. I'm going to go and get a proper coach that knows what it takes. But Tim just went, let's do it. And we were averaging about 3 runs a week. Yes, we did some over distance running, but over the course of many, many months, he created consistency. And when he weighed in the day before the race, I think he was the heaviest athlete that they have ever had on the scales. He was over 50, and which is on the older range of people that tend to do this thing. And he was just like a metronome. And he had not only a great performance when we went back the next year and doubled down on that strategy and ran even less, he went 4, 5, 6 hours faster. And it's pretty exceptional. So the key message on that is you've got an objective to create. Don't just follow the norms and the stereotypes to get there. Have the courage to do what is right for you. And that's how we kept Tim healthy. And really, it's easy for me to prescribe that. It's courageous as an athlete to buy into it and say we're going to do it. And I think that's why Tim and I work so well with each other.
That's great, Matt. That's awesome. Tim literally almost ran himself to death, and I can't even imagine doing 5 miles of that race. So congrats to you, Tim, for getting through that. Matt, thank you for keeping him alive as well, getting through that as well.
So
we'll just have our closing thoughts. Tim, we'll have you start off as we conclude this episode.
Well, I think, the closing thought for me is, Matt offers a lot of excellence in coaching, running, triathlon, swimming, biking. But Matt's, I think, greatest asset, Purple Patch Corporation that he developed, is coaching in life. He takes a lot of people that have their priorities wrong, and he helps them organize their priorities, integrate their priorities, and get the pillars that make their life happier. So I hope anybody listening to this podcast understands it's not about being the fast person in the Boston Marathon, or a fast person in Kona, or a fast person, hiking up, Mount Everest. It's really about making a change in your lifestyle. It's a lifestyle choice, not a physical activity choice per se. Integrating the physical activity into the lifestyle helps you a lot. So yeah, if you go back and look at Matt Dixon's website and think about Matt, he will make you a better athlete, but I think it's more about being a better person for yourself. And then you're a better person for everyone else. And I think at ASPN, we want all of our members to be healthy, both mentally and physically. And those are some of our goals. Patrick?
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt, again, for joining us. I think a lot of these points, hit home for all of us, not only, like Tim said, professionally, but personally as well, as we try to become better in each aspect of our lives. It's great to hear that different side of Tim. Always love hearing stories about Tim. But thank you so much. We definitely got to get you on next season to talk a little bit more and maybe speak at one of our conferences. That would be awesome. I think you would really inspire a lot of people and help us as a whole community. So thank you so much for coming on. And this wraps up episode 6, season 2 of the Pain Unfiltered podcast. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.